portable ink. You know, when they write, this is everything that's needed to make ink, to use the ink on paper or wax tablets, and then to dry the ink and to send mail. So there even comes with, of course, every kid's bane, which is the chalkboard with a piece of chalk and a textbook for penmanship, and that was very commonly used. You know, there's an original recipe here which shocks people because they use. I've actually read them where they use stale wine or stale urine as well, but stale wine vinegar will keep it from rotting. And then basic colors is what's readily available is either from oak trees, either oak gall and bark and acorns, or walnut, which is a utility dye because that's the only one that does not need to fix it and will not rot. From there, they boil those things down. If they want to change the colors, they would use indigo or logwood, which actually logwood, when it's used in cloth, will turn things purple, but in ink, it will be more red.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting. And then to thicken it is gum arabic, and the gum arabic, and this is the crystalline form, and then this is its dissolved form or crushed form, and copperas, which is essential. It's basically copper oxide. Again, it's something that's readily available just about in any ground, you know. And then vinegar, and of course they would keep, as they were adding these things, they would keep sieving it through until it was pure liquid, you know. And then from there, everybody thinks about the quills, but that's only part of it. There were all kinds of portable writing boxes. They would use nibs either on the pens or on the quills or on wooden pens. To me, the most fascinating thing is this little, it's a wax tablet that you can write on if you're like in a situation where you're needing to add or subtract something or whatever, you know, take little notes. They would use just pieces of wood that they'd sharpen, and then just jot down whatever they needed. And when they were done, etch a sketch, they would erase it and start over again. And if the wax got thin, they would just add more wax.
Okay.
You know, so that's the most unusual piece that people don't see actually.
Seeds, the bean seeds will grow up the corn stalk, and you plant pumpkins or squash underneath, and they would put the shade of the ground down to keep the weeds at bay. The corn would shade the squash, the beans would feed the soil with nitrogen, and the corn would hold the beans.
When you purchase into Kentucky, as you were coming to this area, you have to have food with you.
Oh yeah.
And the biggest way you have this time of preserving food is drying. Any fruit, meat, vegetable, you can dry it. So that would be how you would travel with most of your things. This right here is hominy. That hard flint corn, your field corn, that's what you used to make hominy out of. You boil it with lye water, and the lye water loosens the husk, the hull of the corn. And after you've boiled it a while, then you will wash it in cold water 3, 4, 5 times. And as you're washing it, you're kind of rubbing it, and as you do, that hull comes off, and you can then get rid of it with your water as you're changing your water. What it does is it leaves the starchy center part of the corn, and that's why it puffs up so. That's your hominy. If you want to take that and grind it up just a little bit closer, you've got grits. You've ever had grits? Then you can take it and grind it a little farther, and you have cornmeal. So corn was very, very important at this time. Rice travels well. You have plenty of wild rice. You also have white rice. In South Carolina, there's huge rice plantations, and it is a trade commodity. So you would have that rice available to you. Oh, I've got hiccups. Oats, what we would call oatmeal today, they would call porridge. But that was a huge thing to travel with. It was nothing for a man to take him a bag of cornmeal and a bag of oats when he was out hunting. He could make a bowl of porridge. He could make an oat cake. Just like you can take cornmeal, mix either one with a little water. And if you have maybe some dried blueberries and put in with those oats, make it into a thick patty. The cornmeal, that's the hoe cake. As a man was working in the field, he'd have a bag of cornmeal with him and water. When he got hungry, he would take and make a heavy, like pancake. And then he'd build him a little fire, put his hoe over the fire, and fry his hoe cake over that fire on his hoe. You have dried beans. I have a pot of soup beans cooking. You have dried nuts. Peanuts is a thing at this time. Believe it or not, they truly are. You have your dried fruits. Now, Miss Zelda back here, do you want to tell him what you've been doing?
So
You bring it over here so you can show him. Now the pot's hot. Pot's hot. You want to tell him what's in there?
it's dried apples, brown sugar, water,
Blueberries.
dried blueberries, and
Gonna let it cook up, aren't you? What are we gonna make? Some fried pies? Make some fried pies out of them. So you can use those, eat them like that. You can make a pie. Honey, it's hot. I'm gonna put it back.
1776.
Your salt and sugar cured meat, your beef jerky, your smoked meat. Any type of meat you can salt and sugar cure or smoke. But your beef jerky, you can eat it like that. You can also take that and cut it up and put it in stews. You can also cut it finer, chop up some dried fruit, put in some dried blueberries, some chopped up nuts, put some fat in there, make what they call pemmican. It's a high calorie protein traveling cake that will sustain you for a long time. We have country ham that we're frying. So anything that would be, you could dry it, vegetables, anything. After you get settled, then you can start pickling. You can pickle anything. Pickle cabbage, makes sauerkraut. Pickle beans, pickle corn, pickle beets, pickled eggs. You can pickle anything. You can dig you out a root cellar, put your potatoes, your apples, pumpkins, things like that in there and keep them as well. If it's in the winter and you've been hunting, you can make a catch. You can cut your meat up, butcher it, cut it up. Then you can put it out where the ground is frozen and cover it with a lot of rock. And it will freeze. And the rock will keep, if you put enough, it will keep the wild animals out. And then you have your meat available that's frozen throughout the winter time.
Okay. Thank you.
You're good.
Gentleman here is this is a small sample of the goods that would have been the 10,000 pounds value that Judge Henderson would have brought.
So about 10,000 pounds sterling.
Yeah. Wow. So it's not 10,000 pounds of good; it's 10,000 pounds worth of goods.
Yeah, money wise.
As the currency. As money was. Right. We didn't use dollars back then. So we got a lot of little things from silver knickknacks, mirrors, ammunition, stuff like that, textiles over here, wool for, making leggings, match cloths, blankets, things like that, as well as metal goods over here from kettles and pots, fire locks, hatchets and things like that. So this would have been the pretty typical types of goods that would have used in a trade. So kind of makes sense they would have brought that as part of the 10,000 pounds value. That would have been brought up by Henderson. Henderson was a land speculator, he was basically one of the financiers of the Transylvania company who had been kind of looking into buying this land. There's not one party of European Americans making a deal here. There's several different people looking into this. So you have the Transylvania guys that are like wanting to buy what's now Tennessee and central Kentucky,
Okay.
right through what's, I guess we'd call the Cumberland Gap, basically. But you also have the Watauguans that are here already since 72. Could be wrong off that year for off the top of my head.
Okay.
But they were technically under what we would say as a lease, right?
Okay.
They kind of went over west of the line that they shouldn't have been crossing, and just kind of made a deal like, hey, we'll lease the land. 75 starts rolling around, they're like, we want to just do an outright purchase of this land and actually just live here, which it's not a legal purchase, I want to say. It is very, very outside the law. Both North Carolina and Virginia have made proclamations against this purchase, you know, so you have Governor Tryon and Dunmore going, hey, this isn't, like, you know, lawful.
Yeah.
They can't do anything about it. They're like, that's bad. That's it. They can't do anything. The British are the ones supposed to enforce this, right?
Okay.
They don't want people crossing over because they don't want to start another war, right?
Right.
Wars are expensive, they're bloody, they don't want that. But there's different, like I said, different parties that are here. The Watauguans are more your typical frontier settler types. Transylvania, like Henderson, would be more of the land speculators that are wanting to purchase this and then parcel it out. Like they're going to split it up into smaller pieces and sell it to the settlers. Will come here and make even more money. Right. So, and Henderson, he makes a killing off of this. He has a deal of a lifetime. He is basically, the goods he's trading for is essentially a 20th of the total value that you would get, right? He is, what is that, like 20 cents on the dollar he is basically spending on this. It is, like I said, a deal of a lifetime for this guy. And then he can sell it off way later.
Wow.
Yeah. And then a year later a war happens and that kind of goes out the window. So funny how things happen. But yeah.
He was trying to establish a new British colony.
Yeah, sort of. They were kind of trying to make like a, I guess you would kind of say an extra legal colony. So it's not part of Virginia or anything. They're like, we're gonna do our own little thing, and hopefully we'll be recognized by the crown as our own little ideal. Like I said, obviously that doesn't happen because the governors are like, yeah, this ain't happening, and the British really aren't digging this idea as well. So, but like I said, a year later when the war breaks out fully, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah, you guys come a little closer if you want. The stuff isn't gonna jump out at you or anything.
Oh my God.
Hostilities and feuds. So they attacked them and they turned the French against them. So the French declared war on the Squawkies, which lasted for decades and generations. And it was fierce and furious because all the Indians, other than the Squawky and the Sauk, were joining in to wipe out and obliterate the Meskwaki folks. They enslaved the survivors they didn't kill, and they killed thousands. Some claim it was the biggest massacres of Indians in North American history. But they just about wiped them out. The survivors were sold into slavery. Now, the French ended slavery supposedly around 1703 or 4, but they broke their own rules. They continued to use Fox or Meskwaki as slaves in their settlements up on the northeast and also down in the Louisiana country. Now, sometime in this period, I think around 1715, Ata Kalakala, the little carpenter, was born. And he was captured by somebody and ended up with the Cherokees. We do not have the details on who sold him or who captured him or if there was an exchange. But we know in this volatile period, as a baby, he ended up with the Cherokees where he was adopted by a member of a lady of the Wolf Clan. And in Cherokee society, you belong to your mother's family, not your father's. So that made him Wolf Clan for the rest of his life. But he was not born to the Cherokee people. Now the French were also fighting northward from Louisiana in the same period, attacking Indians, wiping out entire tribes that disappeared. One of those major nations they attacked was the Natchez. And before I go into that, the Choctaw were pro-English, but they convinced some of them to turn pro-French and murder some of the pro-English ones. So they instigated a civil war amongst the Choctaw Nation. So that was very brutal. They attacked the Natchez and tried to exterminate them because they were loyally British. And they almost wiped them out. They had to flee north to what's now West Tennessee. That was Chickasaw land. The Chickasaw gave them shelter. And they actually had fortifications, believe it or not. They built forts and protected against French cannons to help the Natchez survive. The French demanded them to give up the Natchez runaways. The Chickasaw refused, and they fought hard and well and drove the French back. The Natchez survivors, some stayed with the Chickasaw. A lot of them went up the Tennessee River, all the way up past what's now Chattanooga, past Knoxville, up to the Cherokee towns to take refuge with the old Cherokee. So even today, there's a place up there on the Little Tennessee River near Fort Loudon called Natchez Town. Natchez Town means Natchez Town. That's some of those refugee survivors they took in. And guess who one of them was? A lady named Naomi, who would become the wife of Compensated, the little carpenter. She was one of those refugees from the French massacres. So here he was that came from a family that had been probably wiped out and massacred by the French, ended up in the Cherokee territory, and then the woman he would marry, who ended up to be Cherokee Paint Clan. She was a survivor and refugee. Now, Little Carpenter throughout his life was often accused of being pro-French. There is no way on earth that I could see he would ever do that, or his wife, because they have a lot of blood in their hands for their relatives and their family. But he was a brilliant politician, so he sometimes let the British believe this to have them give him fair treatment in the trade, in fear that he might turn to the French. Now his name was not at first Atakalakala, or the Little Carpenter. When he was young, growing up as a boy, his name was Ugo Onega, which in Cherokee means white owl. Now Ugo, or owl, is a leader, a headman, a chief of the Cherokees. Very sacred bird, Ugo. And Ugo Onega, white owl, that's those little bitty white owls that come from Canada and they migrate. So it kind of makes sense he'd be named after a real little white owl. But that was his name when he went to London. Now that gets into another story. Oh, look, go to the next slide, please. Now, when he was raised, his mother lived on Neolakwa, which is Big Island. It's now called Sevier Island. It's a big island in the river down there near Knoxville. Now this is a mound in Franklin, North Carolina called Niquosi Mound. The British had been meeting with the Cherokee for decades by the time of 1730 when they met them on this mound. They would go out during the 17 teens and 20s, but the Cherokee towns were all spread all over the southern Appalachian. So it was hard to get to speak to everybody. So they tried to set up rendezvous at certain locations. Eventually, they ended up using Niquosi, which is in Franklin, North Carolina. The mound is there. You see the scale of the cars around it. And they recently entered into a partnership with the Cherokee tribe and the local community who has protected and taken care of the mound for many decades. And it's called the Niquosi Initiative. But you can still visit the mound. And on that mound sat a townhouse. Cherokee mounds were not usually burial mounds. They were a mound upon which they built a house, a council house, like an auditorium, like this, but it's circular. So the leaders, or as many people as they could fit in, would go in there and hear the council and take part in voting. So it was a meeting place. Now on occasion, a very prominent leader, when he passed away, might be buried there to honor him out of respect. But that was not the main purpose of the mound. The main purpose of the mound was to create a meeting place for important talks and discussions and votes. So that's
And right now, witch hazel looks like this. I mean, it's not leafy right now. Here's one from, I just cut this one last night. So it's just starting to do its thing.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
all right, it's making these little cups and things.
Yeah.
But then it will make, when it makes these big leaves, you can always tell, I mean, it's very distinctive what it is in the wood. That's one that I might be willing to try that one if I had some chafing, because that's what's used for sunburns.
What part would you use?
So I would use the leaves. If you're just hiking, you just need to grab something. I think the witch hazel leaf would be a good bet, because you can't hurt yourself. It won't hurt you. And it might help. Something to try.
Yeah.
And if you do, let me know how it works.
All right.
Yeah, so the weapons out here are examples of the kind of firearms that are very common on the frontier.
Yeah.
Mostly because they are cheaper. You've got some with riflings, some without, even though the furniture, the body style is kind of the same. So these two are actually Fowlers, which means that they're smooth barrel on the inside. That way you can use the large round ball or a handful of shot. It also means that they're cheaper to produce. So this rifle here actually has the rifling grooves inside the barrel, so that makes that single ball spin as it comes out, which gives the ball much greater accuracy as it's spinning and cutting through the air. You're looking at an individual rifle, individual target at 250 yards.
Okay.
It's usually the average range you see these guys describe. But when you get into the smooth bores, that would be closer to 100 yards for a pretty sure shot. Me personally, I'm not that good of a shot, so I like going with the Fowler, so I have a bit of a spray effect with the shot behind it as well. But other than that, they're not made for like hand-to-hand combat, military use. They're hunting weapons, so they're usually very thin. They're usually kind of fragile around the wrist and the lower parts, where you're going to be holding on to it to reduce as much weight as possible, make it easier for carrying on long journeys. But these are out here as examples of some of the firearms that were traded with the Cherokee Nation.
Okay.
Because when you have the 10,000 pounds sterling worth of goods kind of sold to the Cherokee Nation in exchange for the 20 million acres of the Treaty of Sycamore Shoals, you're going to see everything from firearms, cooking tools, utensils, cloth, jewelry, everything kind of like that. But these are going to be one of the legal type of guns that will be traded with the Cherokee. There was actually a law against selling rifles. So that meant that your licensed traders, the guys that were allowed by the government to be out here doing business, wouldn't be selling smooth bore, fowling guns, trade guns. The more accurate and therefore kind of more deadly rifles would only be sold by the unlicensed traders, the illegal guys who are trying to get a piece of that business, a piece of that money, without going through the process of getting a license, getting a permit, dealing with all the rules. So usually the guys that are selling guns like rifles are also selling things like alcohol. Another thing that is outlawed by the official licensed traders.
Is that going to feed me maybe a week or something, if that's mainly what I'm eating? So how many pounds of this do I need for one person for a 200 mile journey? I'm probably going to need, I don't know, 10, 15 pounds times 5 if you got 5 people in your, so that's 50 pounds of cornmeal. All right, which we're going to have to add the 50 to it later. What about light? Okay, I could take me a whole big nice candle holder and my tallow candles, or every time I kill a possum or something, I can get the fat, put it in my little grease lamp, go to a cedar tree, take some of the little outside kind of like stringy bark and rub it between my hands and make a wick and put it in there, and that's my light. So that's called a grease lamp or a slut lamp. You ever heard somebody, they'd say she's greasy or she's slutty? That's okay? All right, not something we talk about today. We don't say stuff like that, but what about my medicines, my herbs and things that I'm gonna need? And these are just the dried leaves, and you can tell what some of these things for. They're not very heavy, but then to use those, a lot of times I might need to pulverize them. This is a mortar and pestle. Now my husband can make one of those later, so anything that's wood that he can make, we're probably not gonna take. We're gonna take metal, we're gonna take things we can't produce or procure out there. This right here was my grandmother's. He's gonna make me take every nail out of there. We're gonna take the nails, but not the wood. All of his tools, they're gonna take the long handles out of them, because if you put a handled, big long handled like hoe, and it's on the back of your pack horse, he's got all these handles sticking out. He's getting caught on trees and all kinds of things. So your metal tools. Now my husband, he's got his tools. We're kind of having a discussion about this, and I want to take my feather tick. Now my feather tick is 10 times as much feathers as this. How much do you think, how many pounds do you think this is? Who wants to guess how many pounds this one pillow is? About 4 pounds.
5.
Yeah. It's a feather tick is 10 times that. That's pretty heavy. So you got 40 pounds of feathers. Well, when I was a child, I was much younger than you, my parents gave me a clutch of geese eggs. I raised those geese, and every time that there was enough feathers for me to pluck, I did so. I know it. That's what the duck said, the goose said. He didn't like it. I kept those, thinking all my young life that when I got married, I would have my own feather tick for my marriage bed. And as the years went by, I plucked and plucked and plucked and kept them. And sure enough, by the time I got married at the ripe old age of 16, I had my tick, right? About 40 pounds. Well, then my husband comes home and says, we're gonna move to Kentucky. And I said, well, I'm gonna take my feather tick. He's like, well, I've got to take my tools. I'm like, okay, well, we'll make it work. So we pack our pack horses. Now I'm gonna look into the future of what I don't know yet. What's gonna happen to us when we get to the Cumberland Gap is we're gonna get attacked by Indians. And they are going to rip everything off, take what they want, but mainly they have taken our pack horses. So there is going to be laying my husband's tools and my feather tick and some other things. And he tells me, wife, I have to take my tools. And I say, husband, I have to take my tick. Which one do you think, which one of us is going to win out, me or him? Tools. The tools, you'd think so. But then I'm looking around like, who's carrying this? Even my 40-pound tick I can't carry 200, another 100 miles. I look over there and he's got an oxen, that man does. And it's totally packed and all the horses are packed. But that oxen has these horns. And if I take my tick and bind it up, I can throw that across that oxen's horns and he can carry it all the way to Kentucky for me. See, because this is like my parents that I've left behind, all rolled up. It's safety, it's love, it's heritage, it's all that in there. And what he doesn't know, like a lot of women would do, I've stuck what little valuables we have, what little money and stuff, and sewn it back up so they're hidden in there. It just looks like a tick. So as we progress into Kentucky, we get up, oh gosh, about 50 more miles beyond the Cumberland Gap. And all of a sudden, I see in the wind just feathers, just like out of my tick, floating in the air. And as we come around the corner, we see why. And the place is marked with blood, bodies, and feathers where the ticks have been ripped open by the hands of people that were looking for value. Those feathers didn't look peaceful to me. They were sheer terror. Another woman in our party, after people are killed, crawls into a log and has a baby that night by herself. So I think about those poor geese that I plucked their valuable feathers from just like the hands of the marauders plucked our valuables from the inside of our ticks. So it's a lot to take in and a lot to imagine, having to pack what you thought was going to keep you alive and putting it on a horse on a journey that you didn't know you would survive. And you'd have your kids and you'd have your animals and you had your dreams, and that's really what you were holding on to, is those dreams.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it's a deep honor to be here with you all today in the great state of Tennessee. I'm Colonel Daniel Boone of the Kentucky Militia, and I just can't tell you from my heart and how much this means that you all would welcome me to come and speak with you this beautiful day here in the state of Tennessee. I want you to know that I talked to a few of you out at the fort earlier, and I know that there's some tension in the room. A lot of you want to know why I made the decisions I did at the fort. I heard some of you whisper that you took on the form and appeared as a Shawnee warrior. I promise you it wasn't that I portrayed a Shawnee warrior, that I was forced to take on their appearance of their tribe when I was in captivity, when I was captured and taken up in Ohio. As awkward as it might seem, I'm going to discuss those things with you today, why I made the decisions I did. It's been a long time since I've been in this valley of Tennessee. 4 days ago, on horseback, I stopped there at my boy James's grave, about 4 days ride due west of here, near Martin Station, and I spent the evening with him. Ladies, it's true, I don't think Rebecca ever got over that boy dying there. On that day that his life was taken by those warriors, I buried him in a shallow grave there and dug him back up twice in fear that the wolves and coyotes of these woods would get a hold of him. I didn't even recognize him other than that linen hunting shirt that his mama Rebecca had made for him. But nevertheless, 4 days ago, I sat with my boy, my youngest, 16 years old, and his life was taken in this valley. You've heard me often, that you that hunted with me in this valley, say that my footsteps have been often marked in blood. Many a night I've been the companion of an owl. The sacrifices have been horrendous to establish Kentucky away from Virginia. But nevertheless, you want to know why I made the decisions that I had and why we stayed there at Boonesboro. And rumors has it that we're leaving and we're heading towards Missouri. And I want to talk to you briefly about that. I won't keep you long, I promise you that. That old dog right there has gave me more companionship, and I believe I trust her about as much as I do anybody in my life now, other than my Lord and Savior, of course. And for you that are Master Masons, I stand here before you, Masonically speaking, that I'm your brother, but most importantly, as a Christian man, a man of great faith. I stand here not to be judged by you this morning when we discuss this decisions that I made, but I stand before my Lord and Savior, that he'll be on that ultimate day when I take my last breath. 2 darling children I've lost to the hands of savages now. The sacrifices have been great, many, to establish that land of Virginia into Kentucky. But, be it may, the people of Tennessee are dear to me. How many nights I've walked through here, how many nights I've camped here, how many nights I've shot a small buffalo for a couple of days' meat for the men and women that traveled through here to find the unknown. But again, I think my decision's no different than everybody sitting here today. I just wanted three things. Three things. I believed with all my heart that I would have representation by this government that has taxed us to death. But I also believe I just wanted a place to call home, a little piece of land to build a homestead, and I wanted the freedom to worship God the way I understood Him, the way you understand Him. I told one of the young fellows today, when I was young and foolish, I spoke young and foolishly. But I'm not getting any younger, and I try to speak with great wisdom and not speak emotionally. So, my old moccasin feet are galled, as we say. I put some T-sap on them down there at the river, but they're aching and they're hurting. Frost was heavy this morning, but I put my feet in that stream. But I thought about your family and yours, your boy, your grandson, how many times we've crossed these streams. Why I kept going westward, why did I just keep pushing west? It's like saying to that mountain, why did you climb it? Because it was there. Don't read much into it. I'm a simple man. Most of you that got some age on you today knew my grandparents, and when we arrived on that tall ship up there, Mama and Papa, up in Pennsylvania, we heard about the Yadkin Valley, North Carolina. I don't hardly remember Papa, but I remember the Quakers brought him in twice, not once, but twice, and reprimanded him because some of the girls in the Boone family were dating outside the Quaker faith. I reckon Papa got church hurt. And I heard Papa say that we got a neighbor that's moved 22 miles downstream. This neighborhood's getting too crowded. Let's move on. So we find ourselves in the Yadkin Valley, North Carolina. That's where I became a Mason. It's where I pledged my allegiance at an old-fashioned altar. Actually, it was a tree stump out in the woods. Got on my knees and asked the Lord to be my Lord and Savior, be the head of my life, and let Him do for me what I couldn't do for myself. Got baptized in that creek down there. Ladies, I married Rebecca, the love of my life. We had 10 children. Israel and James were killed by natives. But did you know out of them other 8 kids, you know Rebecca's 10th child died 6 weeks after it was born. But out of them 7 kids, there's 63 grandkids, for God's sakes now. Ain't enough stockings to be given out at Christmas. But enough of that. You want to hear why and why I look like an Indian, don't you? You just say it. I can see it on your face. That I had a scalp lock, had red paint on my face, wore beadwork, on my sash and on my sword, on my leggings. So I reckon that's why you've gathered today, and I'm going to talk to you about it. It's not to try to persuade you to believe what I want you to believe. It's just to tell you the truth, that I didn't have much of a choice. I want to say it was January. I think it was more about February. January had passed. About February the 10th, 77. Now you that's hunted with me know that the Shawnee stayed up in the Ojai Valley then. They didn't come down in this region because they were staying next to their Indian camps, their hunting camps for the winter. We were out of salt, completely out of salt. And I see that look on your face, you know what that means, that we gotta go boil hundreds and hundreds of gallons of salt to get a few bushels of salt to cure our elk, bear, and deer meat for the winter. I felt like it was the right time of the year because it was February that we go up into the Blue Licks. Remember those buffalo? Wasn't it you that said that you believed that a man could walk across the back of a buffalo all the way across the state of Kentucky and never touch the ground? So we went to the Blue Licks where the concentration of the cane brakes were thick and heavy. You could boil hundreds of gallons of water and get a good pot of salt. Men were hungry, men were distraught. They were complaining, whining like a bunch of children. So I took my dog that morning, 2 horses, wandered probably a mile downstream because there was so much commotion. The salt makers were with me, a little over a dozen, man, maybe 15. And I shot a young buffalo that morning. Shot that buffalo, spent most of the day gutting it out, skinning that buffalo out. Had that pack horse put about 200 pounds of meat on one side, 200 pounds on the other. Now here's what I didn't know that rumor has already had it, you folks here in Tennessee know about, but I didn't know. Chief Cornstalk had been to Point Pleasant. Both his boys had been killed by a bunch of drunk soldiers, and they decapitated one of the boys' head and put it up on the stockade. You that have hiked and hunted with me in these woods to find this land, to be free man, know what happens the way of the Shawnee and how savage they are. They're gonna get revenge. And out of the corner of my eye, I see 4 young warriors running up on me on the Licking River there. Not 1, not 2, but 4. And they had that red and black war paint they wear down their face. And you that's like hunted with me knows what that means. Death. That they're marching upon our settlements with a purpose to kill us. We know that word had already spread down into this part of the country that the British were telling and taunting the Shawnee that if you'll scalp our women and children, that we'll give you gunpowder, canteens, shooting bags, linen coats, swords, tomahawks, gunpowder, razor to clean your face up. I did stop and shave before I come across the river. You notice that. If I get a blood dripping, just let me know. My first instinct is to take my knife from my sheath and cut that meat off the side of that horse, because I knew those young warriors were half my age and they'd catch up with me quick. It had started to snow and the temperature had dropped so cold that when I reached down to get my knife out of my sheath, it was frozen into my sheath. My hands were so cold, I didn't have no dexterity. I couldn't even grab a hold of you, I was so cold. Well, at that age, first thing I did is start backing away. Grabbed my rifle, left them 2 horses there, whistled for her to come. I ran probably the length of this fine log cabin that you're in today. When the first shot rang out, it shot my powder home, plumb loose from me. Why it didn't explode, I don't know, but it shot the strap loose. I leaned up against a tree, took my hat off, my rifle up against it, folded my hands in form of just giving up, if that's what you all want to call it. It's true, I gave up. I knew I couldn't outrun these 4 young warriors, and the whole time, I'm thinking if they're on me and they're this close to us, Rebecca and my fort's in ill repair back at Boonesboro, which way had they come? Did they come this way where you live here in Tennessee? Had they come up through the Yadkin Valley? Or had they come from Ohio? But nevertheless, I gave up. They knew who I was. I didn't know about Chief Cornstalk his boys had been murdered by a bunch of drunk soldiers over there. I just leaned up against a tree, and in broken, what English Shawnee language I could understand, he says, "Howdy do, Bill." He knew who I was. And I knew I was in a grim situation. Let me think how I can say this with so many women present. They stripped me down to my nakedness. All I had on was a little breechcloth that morning. They took my moccasins off my feet. They took my leggings. They took my hunting shirt off. They took the silk ribbon out the back of my hair, tied it up like this on a bow, and made fun of me and danced around me. They took my rifle. They took my short sword, hunting sword. They took my powder horn that had already been shot off. They took my shooting bag, and there I stood with it stolen. Ice was forming. You know how the sickles form when we hike? Walk through these woods? Icicles were forming on the leaves. And there I stood in my nakedness with the breechcloth on, barefoot. took a trunk line, just like this trunk line here, and tied it around my hand so tight that my fingers started turning blue. And they dragged me through the woods towards where those men were bowling hundreds of gallons of water. I know there's some children here, so I'll just tell you the G. What happened? They shot my dog. Right there in front of me. That's all I'll say about that, because there's children here. And you that's hiked with me and hunted with me in these woods knows what those dogs mean to me. This is a new one. She's faithful to me, but they killed my dog. And I'll just tell you, I was mad. I was hurt. I was angry. Because I didn't want no part of them. I just wanted to boil water, get salt, and get back to my wife and your people, your family that live over there with us at Boonesboro, that stayed here. I know that some of you stayed at Watauga, some of you went to Martin's. I don't have no quorum about that. They drug me back, and they already had those 15 other men tied up. And they said, we're gonna march on Boonesboro, Martin Station, Fort Watauga, and kill every one of your women and children. Now, I hope you see the sincerity on my face to promise you I didn't make a decision for myself at that point. I made a decision for you, man, you, sir, and you, and all your people, that I knew if they marched upon Fort Boonesboro what they do to our women and children, because we had heard what the British were asking, the scalps of our children and women. We're hanging in the balance of losing our colonies. That night they boiled a couple of pots of that dog. That's all my man ate that night. They forced him to. I sat down and told them if you would take me to Ohio with you, that come springtime, that I would surrender all the people, and I would call a dispatch to be sent to Fort Watauga and Martin Station to give up their people, and we would surrender come summertime. So the new war chief now, the Shawnee Nation, is Blackfish. Because I don't know about Chief Cornstalk. And Chungoa is what they call him. And that night, the women and children of the Shawnee Nation lined up with me still with the breechcloth on and whipped me like an animal. They hit me with their war clubs. They hit me with the back of their tomahawks. They hit me with switches until, I swear, my back was marked like our Lord. I don't care what you really think, but I couldn't get over my dog being in that pot. But during that night, on our way to march up into Ohio, I knew we weren't going towards these forts down here where we all live. But I did know that I saw the corners of their ears turning black, and their fingertips were black. And I noticed that they'd stop along the way and they'd massage their moccasins. I knew what was happening, because it's happened to every one of us in this room, didn't it? All them long hunts we took. You remember when the pelts got worth $1 a piece, $1 was worth $1? How many of them did we kill and skin out in that stinking heat, maggots all over it this summer? I knew what was going to happen. They had a frostbite. Their ears were burning off, but so were ours. And I'm telling you, I literally thought I would freeze to death that night. I cuddled up against a tree and I shivered so uncontrollably. I said, Lord, my God, why have you forsaken me? I have gave my life to you. I have worshiped you. I have baptized our children in your name. Why are you allowing me to go through this? I'm not gonna begrudge you my whole life for the next 3 months that I lived with them, it's true. I looked like them. Them women and children took me the first day I got up there in Ohio to the creek bank and tried to wash my white skin away with sand and stones in the creek to the point I was bleeding. They plucked every hair from my body, other than my eyebrows, and a little small scalp lock on the back of my head, and they put ribbon in it to make them look like them. I don't know. Days turned into months. You know those that travel with me, you know that book I carried with me, Gulliver's Travels? They couldn't read a lick out of that book. They couldn't make sense. Now they had that free black man named Pompey that was with them, that spoke the English language, and he said that book's about giants. They didn't understand Gulliver's Travels. But I want to tell you something that nobody wants to ever talk about, and I don't know where you're at today. But Pompey, that Negro slave, opened that book. You know what book I'm talking about, Sissy. And here's what he read to him that night. In the beginning, the earth was without form and void, and the Holy Ghost stood above on the darkness of the waters and said, "Let there be light." And all of a sudden, my nakedness become big medicine, because I had a book with me about giant people, but I also had a book of Yahweh, the creator of all things. And he said it was the first time they had ever saw the spoken word of the creator that breathed the very life in the existence of who we are as people. And they were scared. Because is there any doubt in your mind as I speak to you and you listen to my heart that they weren't going to kill me that day? Now, I know what you think, and I know what you tell around campfires. Well, they didn't kill you because you were a colonel in the Kentucky militia. That's not true. I hadn't been promoted to nothing yet. I'm in captivity with the Chinese. Well, you blazed the Cumberland Gap. You led your family and your family and your family and your family across those mountains and established Boonesboro. That's why they didn't kill you. It had nothing to do with why they didn't kill me. Because you tell your campfire stories, and in your silliness of drinking that distilled spirits, you say he was just a great warrior. I'm no different than you, brother. I get up in the morning just like you do. I just want a place to call home. I just want to stay here at this fort and live in peace and worship God and watch my grandkids grow up. I don't know where you're at here. I don't know who you are, a lot of you here from this Tennessee Valley. Maybe you're driven by more money, more currency. I hear in the colonies that the paper money's not worth anything right now. I've seen dead men along the Cumberland Gap here that they took a silver dollar and cut it in little 8 pieces just to get tobacco, sugar, and salt. Have you heard that too? They call it 8 bits. That the currency's worth nothing. History always repeats itself. You can say amen to that. We ain't at church. History always repeats itself. I got up there in them mountains. And that's probably real there. I'll use this one here. I know, Jenny. They started allowing me to hunt with them. I started showing them, and I wasn't a blacksmith. You know, you stayed there with me at Fort Boonesboro for a long time. But they needed me to fix these sit triggers. You know, Squire, my brother, was a master gun builder there. So I started fixing their rifles and those muskets they got from the British. I started showing them how to wrap copper around this and how to take buffalo ties and where they break the stocks. And they allowed me to start hunting with them. After they found that book, he says, Blackfish, the warrior of the Shawnee Nation, says, I'm going to call you Big Turtle. Big Turtle. me explains that every turtle on Earth has scoops around it. Some of you call it shells, but it's scoops. There's 12 months on there. There's 365 days. Every turtle, I've never been there, even though it's true, I own some property down there in Florida. Every sea turtle, every little box turtle, every green turtle, and every pond and every waterway in this Tennessee Valley has the calendar year or lunar calendar month on it. They knew I was big medicine. They allowed me to start hunting. He said, I'll call you Big Turtle. Pronounced Shiltoi, and Shawnee. So, gentlemen, let me say this. When I started hunting with them, instead of shooting 60 grains, I shot just 25 just to knock him down. Got to keep that extra powder. When I'd shoot an elk or a bear or a deer, I'd dig it out and put that lead in my mouth and form it back as round as I could get it. I acquired a barrel, a lock, and a trigger mechanism from them, put it in my sleeping robe, hid it in the woods. They adopt me into the nation. He calls me, I'm his son. I dress like him, I look like him, but don't you make no mistake about it. On the morning that I escaped from captivity from them after living there for 4 months, I didn't know it was going to be the morning, but I had that extra lead, I had that extra powder, and I was allowed to ride a horse with a saddle on it that day. And everybody knows what happens when the sun comes up, and we were turkey hunting. It blocked out the morning sun, there were so many thousands. And those guys started shooting wildly. Bang, turkey down, bang, turkey down. And Blackfish's wife was with me that morning. I said, I'm going home. She said, no, your father will be very angry with you. All I remember, my friends, is pulling the mane of that horse towards about where we're sitting today. I rode that horse into the ground when I reached the Ohio River. That's all I'm going to say about that. I took that saddle off, put it up on a sycamore stump, hope a white man find it someday, could use it. I took that barrel, that lock, what lead I had that night. I went down across that Ohio River, was swept probably 8 miles downstream. Day 3, I crossed over where I had been basically captured 3 months earlier. On day 4, I had traveled 167 miles in my bare feet running that horse into the ground in my 50s. Do your mathematics. I was home when the cry went out and Indian just entered the fort at Fort Boone. Rebecca was gone, ladies. She knew I was dead this time. Well, I'll speed up because this is the part I have a hard time with sharing with you publicly. I called for Rebecca. She come back within 8 weeks. We went ahead and made the repairs we did September 9th of that year of 79. 400 Shawnee warriors came to the back of that fort and begrudged us for 9 days. We didn't lose a soul. You know the ways of the Indians, they drag their dead off, so we don't know how many they killed. Say whatever you want to. I don't care much about the Callaway family down there. They had me court-martialed. Tried me for treason. Called me an Indian lover. At least they said it to my face. If you're here today and you're an attorney or a judge, I was your worst nightmare because I read the resentment of myself that day in my closing arguments. Here's what I said. I lost 2 children to the hands of savages. I baptized your grandson. I buried 2 boys. Israel got shot in the mouth at Blue Licks. I didn't even know it was my boy. The only thing I could tell that morning was that linen hunting shirt his mom had made for him. I drug him all the way to Boonesboro and buried him, and that's where he's laying today. You call me an Indian lover. I ain't got nothing for them people, no more than you do. Yeah, I'm going to Defiance, Missouri. My boys built this beautiful stone home house up there. I've lost a fortune. That ain't why I'm leaving today. I'm making one ditch effort to bring honor and dignity back and respect to my family because of what we've done, not by me, but what we've done together. You sitting here bored and you think this is treason when I'm telling you, then we ain't got no fit hanging out together. We ain't family like I thought we were. The colonies are getting ready to spread, my friends. This new America is coming. There's going to be a battle in the Gulf of America that no man's ever seen, and we're going to whip the British. We're going to take that Gulf back one day. You mark my words, because America's going to be lost in the Gulf of New Orleans. But you know what I've been told by President Jackson? Sit down, baby. Sit down. He said, Colonel Boone, I need you to sit this one out. He said, I need you to sit this one out. But what I'm going to do, and you hear me clear because I'm closing, I'm going to bring the Tennessee boys and the Kentucky boys to New Orleans. And when them British tall ships hit that harbor of America, and they march in line in them red coats, we're going to take cover. We're going to take concealment, and we're going to knock off the glare of that front sight. Because you know you don't see like you used to when you was a young boy, because I don't either. And we're going to systematically take those British out one by one, and when we shoot around, we're going to step behind the tree. We'll see how it works out. But we're going to take that Gulf back. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the people of Kentucky, that's really what happened. That's the story. I ain't been back to Tennessee since all that happened. But I come back not to convince you of nothing, just to tell you the truth. You can call me an Indian lover. Obviously, I've said something that sparked a nerve with you, because you ain't got up and walked out yet. And that'd be fine with me too. I got a little buffalo down there on the hill right now. I'm going to finish skinning out. We're going to horseback ride up into these mountains today. I'm going back home, but it's true. I'm going to Defiance. And probably that's where I'll take my last breath. Who knows? So, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Kentucky militia, you remember when I opened up tonight, I said, I'm Colonel Boone. I was found not guilty of all charges at that court-martial. Judges, attorneys, I blistered their hind ends because I told them, shame on you. I just got captured. But I did what I thought was best and negotiate our surrender so they wouldn't kill your people. And whether you believe that or not, it's the truth. But I'm Colonel Daniel Boone of the Kentucky Militia, and I appreciate y'all hearing me out. Thank you.